Uh, it looks like we are live.
We are live from LinkedIn and everywhere else. Cool. So do we want to wait and let people kind of jump in here for a second?
I think we should get going here. Why don't we start with intros?
Awesome. Great. Well, to everyone who is here right at 2 o'clock Eastern or Central, whatever time zone we're on, welcome to this group of founders. We're going to talk about how the last few months have been. Who wants to kick things off? I don't know which of you wants to maybe go first. We could go in order from how you are on my screen, but do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Sure, let's do it.
Well, James, do you want to kick things off and then we'll just go down the line?
Yeah, definitely. So just quick intro. For those of you who do not know me, I'm James Heller. I'm the CEO and founder at Rapify. We're the nation's largest gig economy ad platform, allowing brands to be able to scale advertising on vehicles and measure and attribute what that exposure actually does.
Great. Awesome. Pranav.
Hi guys, I am Pranav Yadav and I'm the founder and CEO of NeuroInsight in the US. So we invented a patented brain mapping technology that allows us to look at how people respond to any kind of communication on any kind of platform, essentially looking at the deepest drivers of subconscious human motivation.
Great, awesome. Kyle.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyle Wong. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pixely. We're a user-generated content and influencer marketing platform that allows brands to empowers brands with a cost-effective way to scale their content strategies by leveraging content that's already created by their communities.
Great, awesome. And Anda.
Hey everyone, it's good to be here with a bunch of fellow 30 under 30s. My name is Anda. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Notch. At Notch, we help plan, measure, optimize, and activate digital content for a lot of different brands, from Ford to Walmart to JP Morgan to Accenture.
Great. And last but not least, Rachel.
I miss all these people. Hey everyone, I'm Rachel Tipograph, the founder and CEO of Micmac. We are an e-commerce marketing and insights platform for multi-channel brands. So if you're a brand where the majority of your sales come from places like Amazon, Target, Walmart, you will likely become my client because you live in darkness with e-retail data.
Well, awesome. Well, great. I mean, there's a lot of directions we could take this. I know that it's been a busy month for everybody. It's probably the understatement of the year. But I think, and during this talk, for anyone who is watching, we're just going to jump around some macro level questions, have everyone weigh in, and also kind of dive a little bit deeper into each of these founders and their companies along the way. So, this is the first question for everyone, and this is probably a long answer, but let's see if we can make them concise. But how has this year been different than you expected? If you want to maybe mention something, I know, right? It's a lot of things have gone differently, but yeah. But, what's maybe something that if you were to look at, January 1st or maybe January 2nd, and how you thought this year was going to go and what you wanted to do, what did you scrap? And, or what were you going to do that you had to scrap and what's replaced it?
Sure. So, just kind of hopping in, I think if I knew what I know now about this period of time, I probably would have gotten a little leaner, a little quicker. And I know that sounds like maybe a recurring theme with a lot of founders. I think that was one piece. And then we would have probably focused on some other features that we were kind of pushing off into later in the year that became way more relevant now. So focusing on different aspects of our product and also making sure that we were operating super, super lean.
Cool, okay.
I would not have moved into a brand new office in Soho, Manhattan in January.
Plus one on that. Plus one.
That's for sure. And I would have hired quicker. We're in a unique position where COVID has accelerated our business because we focus a lot on online grocery, online liquor shopping, and obviously we could not have predicted COVID.
Yeah.
The office space definitely speaks to me. Maybe also probably stock up on more hand sanitizer earlier on. That ended up being really expensive. For us, we help brands use their content across the digital channels. So there have definitely been some areas that have really accelerated because of like the rise of TikTok and other UGC channels during COVID. That's been kind of overall good for our business. But then we also had to scrape some products, like our in-store products, like are no longer applicable right now. So we just reallocated some of those resources to channels like email, for example.
Great. Quick thought, Rachel. So when's your lease up? When can you get out of there?
I'm in negotiations, so I can't
Yeah.
publicly disclose.
That's okay. I was joking there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure for all of us, it's one of the biggest line items in G&A.
Yeah.
And I mean, for everyone who's in real estate, I mean, you had like 100 great years in New York City. It's okay for you to have a few tough ones. Be kind on your renters. But yeah, I mean, you know, we announced last week, we're calling it Micmac Anywhere. We are not returning to our office until there's a vaccine available to everyone. That's proven to work. We've proven as an organization that we can work in the cloud. So it's a big shift.
Yeah, cool, great. So who else hasn't gone yet? So yeah, Pranav or Anda, do you want to mention like, what's something that you want to do this year that now is not going to happen?
Well, just to jump in to share what did happen this year, I think, and I hope everyone else resonates. I think when this COVID first hit, there was just tremendous uncertainty, and so the point that you made, James, around being lean, I would say that was where my head went first. I think us as a company have, for better or worse, always been extremely capital efficient, and so actually looking back, you know, I wish I had known. There were definitely areas that have accelerated because as brands were moving out of event marketing dollars and sport marketing dollars, and to a large extent out of paid advertising, they were investing more and more in their owned and operated digital content. And so I actually wish I would have hired not just more people, but more senior people faster, because I think something else that we haven't yet touched on is the importance of experience and maturity navigating during a time of great uncertainty. And then separately, I think we were doing okay when it came to mechanisms of transparency and accountability, but I think we could have done better, and we're continuing to try to do better just so that we can track everyone's work, but also to make everyone just feel energized in accomplishing their goals. And then finally, from a product standpoint, I strongly believe this, you know, the entire world, but in particular our world, is going to go towards more self-serve products. And so we completely reshaped the product pipeline, and actually launched a product last week that's our first self-serve seat-based product.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I started the year with the Super Bowl, which is a big deal for us. Last year we did 9 out of the 55 Super Bowl ads. So we start the year off very big, advising the biggest companies in the world on how to navigate this complex ecosystem. The truth is, I don't spend too much time thinking about what I would have done differently had I known, because that time has passed. I'll tell you what I did, which is that we were already lean. I think we took a little too much time trying to tell clients how we could actually help them during this time. And by the time we started getting the message out, a part of which you wrote about so eloquently, we realized that the clients were so bombarded heavily by people who were all trying to get some messages in, that the true message that people are feeling a certain way, we can actually tap into their brains and tell you how they're feeling. We can predict what they're going to buy next week. These are the kind of messages that will resonate. We were a little too delayed on that. So that I certainly regret not doing faster, and we should have done better at.
Yeah.
Oh, I have one more thing to add. Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Because I'm actually learning from Rachel on this one. We did not take enough breaks. I did not take enough breaks. And I'm coming to realize how much more I work during the day and how bombarded my brain is by all these squares on the screen that I'm constantly interacting with. And so that's actually still a learning process. I'm trying to figure out what the right balance is, but just encouraging the team to take more time off.
Well, yeah, actually is so true, and I resonate with that, because if you think about it, for all of us being the CEOs of our companies, we were very on the entire month of March, right? And a lot of probably still now, partially because once COVID hit, everyone wanted to know what we were going to do about it. Your customers, your team, your investors, everyone wanted your opinion on it, and definitely required you to be on at all times.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same way. I thought at the beginning, okay, I was on the road 2 to 3 weeks out of the month, as probably most of you guys were. And I thought, okay, well, this is going to be a time where I'm going to have more time for personal health, and I'm going to be able to eat better and sleep better and exercise more. And like none of that happened in March. Like slept worse. I didn't go to the gym because they were all closed. I couldn't really do anything outside. And it feels like now that we're all in like kind of this flow and we understand how to operate in this new environment, that some of that's starting to actually happen. Like I feel like my personal health is better than it's been in a while. So it's good to see that that's starting to happen. I'm curious to hear if that's.
Yeah, we had to institutionalize forcing people to take a break. The reality is this is a difficult time no matter where you are in life, but for parents, it's really difficult. For people of color, it's really difficult. And what we realized about the employee base is that they were almost scared to ask for permission to take off. So we did a few things. One was we institutionalized personal hour block. So you have to block an hour off every day in your calendar. And it's called personal block, and no one's allowed to schedule over it. The second thing was we finally did summer Fridays. We actually started that on May 15th. And the way that we did it is we broke the company into Team A, Team B to ensure that there was coverage. And this week, Team A has the entire Friday off. Next week, Team B. That's been really effective. And then we are forcing every manager in their weekly direct reports meetings to ask, when are you taking vacation this summer? And I said to the company, I want to see every person take a full week this summer. And then the last thing, and this really came, we have 2 employee committees right now that are really active at MCMAC. One is a D&I committee, but the other is a mental health committee. And they actually pointed something out to me, like talk about founders and having blind spots. Our vacation policy says for every day that you want to take off, you have to give 1 week's notice. So if you want to take a full week off, you would have to give 5 weeks notice. But in COVID, that's like kind of unrealistic. And so the employee base was asking for us to create this new policy around mental health days. And then what we realized is like, that's not exactly what we want to do. And instead we turn sick days into health days. And so it's no question asked when you want to take a health day. And so if it's a mental health day, fine. If it's a sick day, fine. But it's just called a health day. And all of those things combined, like my employees, and we survey, tell us that they feel really supported right now during COVID. And I believe it's because it's all of those things that we put in place.
Awesome. That's good to know. Like it reminds me of something I was talking to just an advertising executive a couple days ago, and they're talking about the importance of checking in and just with employees, with friends and stuff like that. And do each of you feel like that's gotten like to that point? Has it gotten easier to like check in and have those honest conversations with your coworkers, investors, employees, or do you think that's still kind of a hard topic to have an honest conversation around because it's just so needed? But I know it's everyone has a different kind of threshold for what they feel comfortable talking about.
Yeah, one of the things I did right at the onset was starting to I already have regularly scheduled meetings with all of my direct reports, but I started adding some of the folks that I don't necessarily get a chance to talk to on a weekly basis. And sometimes it is hard because they want to talk to me about like how awesome they're doing or how much throughput or what new product, but the purpose of the block on the calendar is really to talk about like how they're doing. And so sometimes it takes a little while to like actually get a chance to talk about like how they're personally doing and what I could do to help.
Sure.
I think it's important to think about our key relationships. And I would say they start with our team, but then they continue onto the board and to the larger investor set. And what I noticed when COVID first hit was this scramble from the investor set to get data on their companies, just understand like how much runway, do we need to worry about you essentially. So I got a couple of messages, not even from my investors, but from junior folks on their team basically saying, send me all of your, projections and the reforecast of the projections. And I just reached out to my investors and I said, hey guys, this is not cool. Like we're all just trying to figure out how to do right by our customers and by our teams first and foremost. So just take a beat and we'll come back to you soon. But then, on the flip side of that, I recognize that being proactive is equally important. So I started just creating initially was every 2 weeks, a board update. And I used to have such a high bar for these previously where I would like format them and put them in decks and all that. And I kind of just started writing, structured essays in terms of how we're all doing, what we're doing as a company, going on, what we're seeing. And then now it's, every month, and I have check-ins with every board member, actually, check-ins with my direct reports. And every Friday, there's 3 hours on my calendar. It's called AAA, which is Ask Onto Anything. And it's basically time for anyone in the company to sign up and just talk about anything.
Cool. Yeah. I think for me as well, like definitely increasing the frequency of communication to the team and our investors has been super important. So I think I totally agree with everyone. I think everyone else said. The one area that I think was also very challenging during COVID was dealing with some of our customers that got furloughed, and partially because we work in a variety of different verticals: travel, e-commerce, apparel, CPG, and they're all doing a little bit differently during this time period. So I've also tried to make sure we check in with some of those people as well.
Oh, great.
We have an issue with
I started I think on the very first day, sent an email out to the team reassuring that for the next quarter, they don't have to think about anything that would cloud their judgment on the company's health. So I guaranteed, obviously, all the things that they would get otherwise as employees of the company, so that everybody could rest properly with the idea that their jobs would be fine. And then next, we spend a lot of time doing random sessions. Given we work in the area of the brain, we have weird tricks for our brains. One of which is random creativity sessions where we, just talk about things that we want to talk about. We've read poetry to each other. We've tried to organize other forms of creative expressions that people can share with each other. So that's been remarkably helpful. And we've actually spent a lot of time upskilling that people have really enjoyed. We'd invite speakers from different companies with different skill sets to come in and train the team. A session could be around what is a brand muse and how do companies look at their own brand muse, and then giving people assignments for 3 continuous weeks to build their own. What is a visual identity? How does one think about that? How does people think about using graphics as a way for expression? So things that we've been familiar with but haven't really truly studied or gone deep within. It allows the mind to switch off all the areas that otherwise occupy the space. And once you actually fill it up with something else, it gives it a refresh. And that we've found to be a particularly useful tool.
Which also illustrates the need for breaks.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm just candidly, I'm really bad at that. It's like, I'll look up and we're all like 5 hours are gone. And like, I'm not good at it. And so what's interesting is you're not asking for my opinion, but I'm going to weigh in. What's interesting, I was a reporter at Forbes and became editor right before the pandemic started. So it's been interesting for me to figure out, like, it's not just how do I report on this pandemic and everything that it means, but also how do I work with our contributors? How do we plan events and do lists? And so it's been interesting to think through, like, how do I, as a journalist, I don't have customers, but we have readers. Like, what are the things that we should be covering, that matter to people? And like, how does that, like, how do our contributors think about this versus how do I do, and how do I even check in with them and how they're doing as writers? Cause they all have their own full-time jobs as well. And so it's, but Pranav, like, I know that like you obviously have done a lot of, you guys are doing the research and stuff like that. And I wrote the story about it when the results came out. I know several of you are in like the market intelligence space. And a question I wanted to ask, just thinking about that, and what have you seen, especially in terms of advertising, what's been shifting right now? I know, like, I'm kind of curious, like, what you think about this when you're thinking about like the impact of advertising and the shifting and pausing of spending. Is there anything that you want to mention about how you've seen clients react over the last few months. There's been a lot of talk of spending dropping, but it seems like it's shifting to more of the streaming stuff. But just any thoughts in general that you kind of have on that?
You want to go first?
Well, yeah, happy to. Let me start by saying that the data is not as clean as one would expect.
Sure.
I think, we all kind of ran towards making assumptions around what categories we're going to spend versus not. And the fact that everything was going to drop, no, everything's back on, everything's moving internally. I think potentially we as an industry like making proclamations, and really what we've seen is that the truth is everyone is adjusting and shifting their level of spend. But for any company that is in the digital space that is, essentially cloud-based, there is definitely a tailwind because the shift has benefited all of us in some ways. That being said, I would say the caveat, which is a pretty big caveat, there are industries that are just hurting. I think there's certain categories of retail that are hurting a lot. There's obviously travel and hospitality that's hurting a lot, transportation and energy, although it seems to be coming back slowly. So I think the data is kind of all over the place, but at a really high level, I would say acceleration in the creation of digital content, acceleration in either a feeling or an actual movement of marketers bringing more stuff internally, more and more dependency on self-serve products, and a desire to build a more direct relationship with their audience, especially in light of the Facebook boycott and what that might mean for brands across the board, from CPG to B2B brands.
Cool, great, thanks.
And from my perspective, it's more, Anda's a super expert when it comes to the tactical aspect of the execution of that. But my role comes more in the quality or the content that gets put out there. And to me, it is probably one of the most disappointing times in the industry, so much so that it makes me not want to be here. I think that these companies that have a responsibility to not just their consumers, not just their shareholders, their consumers, haven't done enough. All efforts at creating content that would speak to people or showcases to them that they understand the situation have been superficial and create no movement. In fact, further waste the shareholders' money when they put content out there without putting enough thought in there. Now, it's not easy to come up with that content, especially at a time where your stock price is 30% down. You've had to lay off 100 people. So I understand the difficulty, but I do not think that any organization, has successfully tried to gauge the shift in consumer perception, their needs, and has tried to communicate with them in the fashion that matches the magnitude of what has happened.
Yeah. Marty, I would just say that some trends pre-COVID have just gotten accelerated. Like before COVID, every brand struggled with producing enough content, right? For all their different channels. And the more you invest in digital, the more content you need. So that's something that we've seen pretty directly with our customer base, because in addition for the demand for content increasing, you also really hurt the supply side because a lot of photo shoots got canceled during this time. So for us, we've actually seen brands tap into our content a lot more during this time, just because there was no alternative. And as a result, I think they actually saw some pretty good results because one, it was more cost effective, and then two, it actually better represented their customer base. So it's like before COVID, that was helpful. It just got accelerated, I think, because it was the only thing.
I think one, in the industry subset that we kind of play in, the out-of-home space, the onset of the pandemic was a huge blow to an industry that 2020 was supposed to be the year for out-of-home. It was supposed to be the year we broke 10 billion in total, total revenue, and brands pulled back because they just assumed that nobody was out because they're all under quarantine. And what ended up happening, and I think this is actually going to have a really positive effect to out-of-home in the long term. It started to make these different providers really lean on data and push them to sell audience rather than selling real estate. And that's what brands want. Brands want to buy audience, and it needs to be easier to buy. So what's happened, it's definitely happened at Rapify, is the industry kind of got a kick in the pants to kind of push this digital transformation that it's really needed to see for the last 10 years. And it's been a big part of why we even started Rapify in the beginning. And then for us personally, we were, before all of our messaging was around our ability to segment to rideshare across the nation. And rideshare usage went way, way down. But at the same time, food delivery and grocery delivery went way, way up. So our ability to actually get brands in neighborhoods where people actually are on delivery was a huge, huge value add for Rapify. And it was something that has been able to help us bear fruit in navigating the pandemic.
Yeah. Have you noticed, speaking of out of home, because it's something I've been curious about since January or February, I've been wanting to write more about that space because it's, as you notice, it was growing. And, when you're thinking about just usage and what markets have you seen kind of pick up more recently, especially when you're thinking of car-based cities versus somewhere like New York? Anything you want to mention on that? Have there been any surprises of where, you've seen,
yeah. So one of the things that's really cool is we've always focused on using traffic data as a currency for being able to translate to actual audience. Mm-hmm. And the industry and some of the big players like Geopath have been touting where the traffic is, because one of the challenges, especially if you live in Manhattan, is your vantage point of what the current state is very different than somebody who lives in LA or lives in Phoenix, Arizona, or Austin, Texas, or Miami. Basically, if you're in any one of those states, your reality of what's going on and how open up the world is right now is very different than somebody who's living in Manhattan. So we've seen brands focus on the markets where people are out and about or are reliant on vehicular use for broader out of home, because you're able to actually capture that audience, and they're demanding buying audience rather than buying the location, right? And so that, I think, actually will help the industry in the long term. Sure.
Speaking of other kind of growing spaces that have really benefited in some ways from pandemic, e-commerce, and just everyone's at home. I probably bought more things online during those 4 months I was just stuck in my apartment in Brooklyn mm-hmm. than I did ever. The boxes just piled up. And so, Rachel, I know that MikMak had just released some new products and services back in February, I think, right? Tell us how's that been going, and kind of when you're thinking of February launch date to now, just tell us a bit more about kind of how that's been and what have you noticed in the e-commerce space?
Yeah, I mean, man, so much of this is luck, right? I wanted to get the new product out the door before Shop Talk, which was in March, and then Shop Talk didn't even happen, but COVID happened. So the way that I describe what's going on in e-commerce, and I mean, the industry headlines also tell the same story. Month of March was just pantry stocking. It reminded me of my mother during every hurricane growing up, where she would rush to the grocery store and buy everything in sight because she was so fearful. The difference though with COVID is that in order to do that in March and April, you had to sign up for Instacart. You had to sign up for Amazon Prime. And the highest at-risk population were people who were over 60. And people who were over 60 had never bought online groceries before. So it was literally this transformational moment to accelerate e-commerce, not in just a way where online grocery and online liquor shopping became mainstream, but with a customer segment that the entire industry thought was going to be impossible to convert. So that was the big thing that changed. It takes 21 days to build a habit. We're now, I believe the latest count is we're 168 or 170 days into COVID. That consumer behavior is here to stay. And that's why you're seeing insane evaluations and M&A activity that's happening in last mile delivery. And I also believe that right now, somewhere in Pittsburgh or Silicon Valley, there's a group of engineers that are trying to innovate within that space, because the unit economics actually don't work out. It's really expensive to do click and collect and last mile delivery. And My personal belief is that the only way that that becomes efficient is actually via robots. And you talk about Rapify, I mean, business opportunity for you, right, is to get in on that, because I think there's going to be amazing sampling and brand experiences in that last mile delivery space. Industries that got hit really hard, obviously apparel and footwear, but especially within luxury. And then the same thing went for beauty. I mean, when I first started the enterprise software company in the beginning of 2017, my first clients were beauty brands. Beauty brands got gutted. There was early signs of this in December and January in terms of what was happening in China. And then more in particular, luxury beauty got hit particularly hard. The pockets of health within beauty happened within skincare.
Yep.
And then eventually hair care, because salons were shut down and everyone had to take care of themselves at home. We're starting to see some rebound, which I'm happy about for the industry in terms of apparel, footwear, and luxury. It's interesting to see how Americans think about their money. I think there's this notion right now, because you didn't spend for the past few months, now all of a sudden you saved and you could start spending again. Yet we know that unemployment is at an all-time high. So like, there's a little bit of like trepidation there for me. But at least it's beginning to bounce back, and I'm becoming more optimistic about Q4. These brands that essentially went dark for the past few months are now talking about Q4 plans with us that were hit hard in those spaces, and shoots are picking up. So original production shoots are starting, at least in New York, are starting to happen again. So that gives me optimism as well. But I think what the brands have experienced inside their organizations is that they weren't ready for this acceleration. And, you know, Anda led, I got to be her wing woman. We did several weeks of these marketing roundtable discussions. And it's interesting to hear the spin in the industry that essentially all of their acceleration plans just got accelerated.
Yeah.
And that's where they were, you know, putting their energy. But the reality is, like, a lot of these companies didn't have the talent within the building to pull this off, which is why the under 30 Forbes ecosystem is so valuable, and just a lot of players in our space, because brands need partners to help them navigate these times.
Yeah, it was interesting. Well, you mentioned robots, and I was thinking about, I think it was just today, Amazon announced they're going to be having some robot delivery in Atlanta, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's so that'll be interesting to see kind of how that goes. It's what's interesting too. So speaking of shoots, so wanted to come back to you, Kyle, for a second here. So thinking about just the change in production of, marketing and stuff like that. And then, people, crowdsourcing more and stuff like that, but also thinking about just the need for more diverse marketing in the industry. And that's been a big discussion for years. And it seems like obviously there's still a lot of work to go there, but anything that you've noticed or anything that you want to mention when you're thinking about kind of the benefit of this, there's a word I'm blanking on, but just like this, disruption, that's the word. This disruption, the way that people do shoots normally, they're not just going to go with necessarily their normal production partners. They're going to be having to think outside of the box. So anything you want to mention on just like what should brands be doing right now to think more about, not just diversity of who's in the ads or who's in, whatever, but who's creating them just along the pipeline?
Yeah, well, I think the Black Lives Matter movement really put a spotlight onto this. And I think the reality is the marketing and advertising industry plays a critical role in shaping culture and society. And we as an industry should do better to make sure that different underrepresented voices are included in our messaging and marketing. With that said, during COVID, like I said, sometimes necessity is breeded out of scarcity. What you're noticing with rise of platforms like TikTok, right, is that, everybody with a smartphone is now a content creator. So during this time period, not only did brands look at their customers for content, they also tapped into some of their employees as great content creators. They also tapped into some of their brand ambassadors a bit more as content creators as well. And I don't think that this is going to completely replace the top-down content strategy. That's still going to be there. But I think just for the next decade or so, to create a scalable content strategy, you need both a top-down and a bottoms-up approach. And what the bottoms-up approach does give you is speed, velocity, and it gives you different variety and diversity of content. Because at the end of the day, seeing photos of real people who look like you helps people buy, especially if you're an underrepresented minority.
Great. Well, just kind of broadening things out here, a question for everybody, and kind of picking up on Rachel, you mentioned this too, just the, just the benefit of, brands working with startups versus just doing things, always internally. And just because there are a lot of diversity of thought that comes from startups, as you guys all well know. What's something that maybe, if we want to go around to everybody here, but tell us maybe something that you think that maybe brands aren't doing enough of, or could be doing more of when you're thinking about maybe just an idea of what they should be doing, or even just how do you communicate better from partners to brands when everyone's just in crisis mode and they might not necessarily think to put their head up to think of a new idea.
I think one of the things that this is allowing brands to highlight in terms of their brand strength is, okay, if you're a brand that leads with purpose, then this is a great period of time. If you're a brand that has been completely leading with profit and shareholder value and that's the only purpose, this is really difficult because they've got to unwind, the way that they build their marketing strategy. And so I think what it's done is it's bifurcated a lot of brands. They're brands that just get it, and they've always been this way. And this has just been like fuel on the fire for the way that they approach brand strategy. And there are other brands that are just kind of sitting and waiting. And I think those brands are just, they're wasting a really valuable period of time, because this is your time to shine. If you don't have a very clear brand purpose, today is no better time than ever to make sure that it's out there.
Sure. What's everyone else think about that? Not just that, but like other ideas that you have, just thinking about.
Yeah, the strange thing is, like, I usually, when people talk to me about their personal lives, I ask them the question, what are you trying to solve for? Are you trying to solve for the 70 or 80 years that you will live? Are you trying to solve till the age that you can imagine till, which is probably 50 or 55? Are you trying to solve for your family? Are you trying to solve for your community? You're trying to solve for humanity or your nation, whatever it may be. Your actions then should be reflective of that. And if you are saying that you're trying to solve for humanity, then you can't actually have a short-term view. You need to figure out about things like climate change and how we create a more inclusive society, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with organizations. If, like James said, if the objective is profit maximization, it's a different strategy. But if the objective is adding value to society, it's a different strategy. Unfortunately, as you were, thinking out of the box, they get out of one box and get into another one. When BLM happens, everybody, all ads have suddenly started showing people of color, which great first step, kudos to them. But our work suggests that doesn't do much. In fact, you could actually showcase an entire story where you did not see someone like yourself, yet the story had enough heart in it for you to want to believe that this was inclusive, and vice versa. You could have a story where someone looks like you, but was made for someone who doesn't understand you. And therefore, you're not going to want to connect with that at all. So the point is to basically get organizations to understand that, not to jump from one box into another box, rather than what better things do we have to do than to actually fulfill what we were born to do, and they don't do that enough.
Sure.
I wanted to just respond and say that I think I hope that if COVID has taught us anything, is that one, for-profit companies are always going to chase profit, but that most importantly in today's world, in order to chase profit, you actually have to have good values and do good in the world. And so I hope that those two are going to start being more in line, those two directions. In terms of ideas, what I would love for brands to take this moment to really do is to think about what it might take to build a truly independent marketing stack. And I've been singing this song for so long. Rachel's laughing because she's like, yep, you've been saying this for a while. I'm very passionate about this. We talk about, I messaged you guys about it. We talk about COVID as the great accelerator, right? And I think this also means that as a marketer, as an individual marketer, you now have the license to challenge and the license to adopt new things and experiment and do really anything in the name of that acceleration so that you can get to whatever endpoint you want to get to faster. And so building a independent tech stack that is a combination of best-in-class technologies is definitely a complicated endeavor, but it's been done. And I was actually working on a piece together with our customer at Walmart, Aaron, who is in the comms team there. And he actually wrote a piece around how he built an independent comms tech stack that I thought was extremely valuable. And I really hope that more people do that, because the conclusion of that entire experiment was that it cost him a lot less and he's getting an incredible output. And he's at the forefront of the industry by working with a set of best-in-class companies. So that's my challenge to marketers. I hope they take me up on it.
Yeah, interesting.
Anda has been saying that forever, and it is a great idea. I would say, I think brands are undervaluing right now some of their greatest assets, which is their internal programming. So behemoth companies have the resources to do, unconscious bias training, to bring in guest speakers. And a lot of them are doing it right now. And my clients are these huge brands, and I just literally ask permission. I'm like, can I come? Because we at MicMac, can't do that. We don't have access to those types of resources, or you're way more knowledgeable in this type of programming, and I want to learn from you. And I said this to one of the biggest brands in the world, a woman who leads D&I, and she was like, you're right. Why aren't we inviting partners right now? And she started to invite us and other partners. And I think the same thing can go for the end consumer. Like, it doesn't have to stop with your vendors. And so there's a lot of assets that brands are sitting on that I just don't think they recognize as valuable to the end consumer right now.
Sure. So I know we only have a couple minutes left here. There's a lot of other questions, but we don't have time for them. One thing I want to end on here in these last 2-3 minutes. It's a cheesy question, but I think it's valid. What's a big prediction that you have for this year? Like, what's something that you think is going to happen later this year that people might not already expect? What's going to be your big bet? Even if it's not related to your companies, what's your big bet for the next 6 months or even the next 18 months?
I don't know if this is a big bet, but it's something that I've been thinking about in the last couple of days. And that's, there's going to be this period of time where like in-person meetings are going to start happening again, but it's not really like we don't really have a vaccine or neutralizing antibodies or anything that'll help us get through this. But like there's going to be this weird kind of gray area. And I'm really curious about like how founders are going to persist through that, because you've got, at the end of the day, if you've got a brand that will take an in-person meeting with you or an agency or whatever, I'm going to go. So I'm interested to see how we navigate this kind of intermediary period between now and when things are starting to open up maybe prematurely.
I've been shocked with how effective relationship building has been remotely. I was not betting on it. And I actually think it's going to create a pretty fundamental shift in enterprise software and just sales software, the selling of software. I think there's going to be more and more inbound models. We're thinking very actively with our new self-serve product, like what sort of sales make sense, especially given the cost of sales in an organization like ours. What does enterprise sales mean going forward? And can we be more efficient because we can do so many of these a day versus the travel and conferences that we were doing before? And I think everyone's going to try to build their own community. I strongly think that the software companies that are going to build communities around them are going to win, especially if they manage to create online communities that are extremely engaged. Because if there's one word that I think defines how we all feel is, lonely, and needing to belong to a community and giving people that community and that platform, I think is going to be a total, change maker for certain software companies. And I hope that we're one of them.
Yeah. And I think like community is both a differentiator and a growth lever for all types of businesses, whether you're a B2B software, whether you're a consumer, et cetera. So in terms of predictions, I think we touch upon a lot of the things. One thing that I've been always thinking a lot about recently is that anytime there's massive amounts of change like this, it always creates new opportunities for people because it kind of levels the playing field. So for example, the max amount of experience that someone can have in a post-COVID marketing organization is 3.5 months. So as a result of that, I think it's going to actually lead to a lot of different leadership changes in different organizations, and it's probably going to elevate certain people in certain roles. For example, during the last 3 months, the social media role has been on 24/7 between COVID and Black Lives Matter. They've gotten a lot more exposure as the only on channel for a lot of brands. So I would imagine to see a lot of those people be able to use that as an opportunity to kind of rise through the ranks in their career as well.
Just to play a little bit devil's advocate, James, I actually don't think we're returning to the office or to in-person meetings in 2020. I think once school starts in the US, we're going to see a spike again. And there's also a complete lack of childcare in the US right now. And every organization that's spending an enormous amount of time right now figuring out a return to the office, come October, is going to throw their hands up in the air and say, office is closed. And I think that we'll see even more transformation in the workplace because people literally are going to have to say to themselves, what is our new remote culture? Because the answer cannot be trying to recreate what you once had in the physical world online.
Right.
Couldn't agree more. The only prediction I would add is that personally with my investments outside of this or things that interest me, I divide people into people who are most affected. The unemployment numbers that Rachel was talking about, the people who make a living a certain way where when things stop happening, that they stop making money. That is one segment of our population. There's another segment of the population, office going, who makes a salary and has been impacted, but the money coming in, those are the people who are saying like, oh, I've saved money for the past few months and now have money to spend. And then there's a crowd that's completely price insensitive. And so the targeting will actually start happening not by demographic, not by geography, but the mind state that you have been put into because of the situation. And it will actually change people's behaviors. The same thing will happen in businesses as we start opening back up. There are businesses that have flourished during this time. They have a different mindset coming into this month. There are businesses that have been hurt badly. So the segmentation is going to be around what they actually had to face during this time, and the bets that I make in terms of what will flourish versus not will be according to that. Like for people coming back into the offices, there are already conversations that the biggest companies in Manhattan may not actually give up on their leases, may actually reinvent the culture altogether, much like Rachel was talking about. So there's an entire market for what that would look like. There's an entire ecosystem that would be created. And unless we're already thinking about how to be a part of that ecosystem, we've missed the boat. So that's something I would bet on.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. That's unfortunately all the time we have, but it's been great to hear kind of how the last few months have gone. And yeah, and thanks to whoever is able to listen to this or whoever watches it in the future.
Hey, Marty, thank you so much for doing this all. Thanks for being able to take time out of your day. I'm going to end the live stream now. I'll make sure to share the link to the live stream with everybody on the chat, and we'll get it across so we can get folks that didn't have the chance to tune in to be able to watch it, because I think there's a lot of really amazing conversation that happened here.